A cold murder case is finally solved. Let's get out to Highland Park in Shawn Lay, where a woman was shot and killed last summer. Shawn, you have news of a big break in this case.
A tragedy here at the Woodward Inn, but it happened months ago. Really, just one clue to this one is this 24-hour video. Good cameras here. That gave MSP something to go on. They truly called this investigation a whodunit. Well, it has been solved, and now Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy made the announcement today.
June 2023. As rainbow flags unfurled across America, marking the first day of Pride Month, a hotel room in Atlanta became a crime scene. The body of 34-year-old Ashia Davis lay motionless on the floor. Blood stained the sheets, her belongings scattered across the room. Ashia was a nurse, a black transgender woman with dreams and ambitions. Hours earlier, she had checked into this hotel to meet someone, a 17-year-old named Carlos Scotland. But sadly, the meetup between these two strangers ended with one dead and the other facing murder charges. The hotel staff reported hearing an argument, then silence. By the time they knocked on the door, it was too late. Police found Ashia's phone with messages arranging the meeting. They found her purse emptied. They found her life cut short on what should have been her day of celebration. But they didn't find Carlos, not immediately. He had fled the scene, leaving behind evidence that would eventually lead investigators to his doorstep. This was him going into the hotel, and that's him running out of the hotel after shooting Aisha. What drove a teenager to take the life of a woman who dedicated her career to saving others? Was it planned, or did something trigger a fight in those final moments? The truth about what happened in room 237 would prove more complex and more heartbreaking than anyone initially suspected. What exactly happened in that hotel room? How would two strangers can enter a room but only one walks out alive? This is the story of Ashia Davis, and in this story we'll cover everything about identity, acceptance, and the dangers many transgender individuals face every day. Welcome to Crazy Dark Files, where we examine the most disturbing true crime cases that mainstream media often overlooks. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories and honoring victims like Ashia who deserve to be remembered.
She was beloved in her community, and she was known to be generous and a compassionate person, according to her family and many, many friends.
Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy highlighting the tragic and mysterious murder of Ashia Davis. Let me take you back to June 1st, 2023, and the Woodward Inn in Highland Park. A security camera capturing this person coming in, then running out. But that person wasn't captured for months. That night, police finding the body of the 36-year-old Ashia Davis in her room. She had been shot in her head.
It is alleged that the defendant shot and killed her. At the time of her death, she had recently completed nursing school and was going to start a new job when her life was tragically cut short.
Ashia Davis was born in 1989 in a small town outside Atlanta, Georgia. From an early age, she knew she was different. Growing up in a conservative community wasn't easy for someone who felt disconnected from the gender assigned at birth. But Ashia had something special, a quiet determination that would define her entire life. As a child, Ashia showed remarkable compassion. Her mother often recalled how Ashia would care for injured animals and comfort friends when they were upset. This natural instinct to heal would eventually guide her career path, though the journey there wasn't straightforward. High school proved challenging. Ashia struggled with her identity while facing bullying and isolation. Despite these obstacles, she maintained good grades and developed a small circle of loyal friends who accepted her for who she was. These early experiences with rejection shaped her resilience, but also left emotional scars that never fully healed. At 19, Ashia made the courageous decision to live authentically. She began her transition, a process that brought both liberation and new challenges. Some family members struggled to understand, while others stood firmly by her side. Her mother, though initially confused, became her fiercest advocate. "I didn't lose a son," she would later tell reporters. "I gained a daughter who was finally able to smile." Ashia's transition coincided with her pursuit of higher education. She enrolled in nursing school, driven by that same compassion that had marked her childhood. The medical field wasn't always welcoming to transgender individuals, especially a decade ago. But Ashia persevered. Classmates later described her as focused and determined, often staying late to master procedures and study complex medical concepts. In 2016, Ashia graduated with her nursing degree, an achievement that represented not just academic success, but personal triumph. She had navigated a challenging educational system while simultaneously embracing her true identity. The photo from her graduation shows a woman beaming with pride, her mother standing beside her with tears in her eyes. Ashia's career began at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, where she worked in the emergency department. Colleagues noted her exceptional bedside manner and ability to connect with patients from all walks of life. She had a particular gift for calming anxious patients and making them feel seen and respected, perhaps because she knew what it felt like to be marginalized. Ashia was the nurse you wanted when everything was falling apart, a former coworker shared. She never judged anyone, she just helped. Outside of work, Ashia built a life filled with meaningful connections. She volunteered at youth centers, offering guidance to LGBTQ+ teens navigating their own identities. She maintained close relationships with a tight-knit group of friends who described her as loyal, funny, and always ready to listen. Her apartment was filled with plants. Nursing them back to health became a hobby that friends joked mirrored her professional calling. Dating proved more complicated. As a Black transgender woman, Ashia faced a dating pool often clouded by fetishization, rejection, or dangerous encounters. Friends worried about her safety, especially when meeting new people. Ashia was cautious, but remained hopeful about finding genuine connection. By early 2023, Ashia had established herself as a respected nurse with 7 years of experience. She had recently been promoted to a charge nurse position and was considering returning to school for an advanced practice degree. Her financial stability allowed her to help support her mother, who had developed health problems in recent years. Ashia had dreams beyond her career. She talked about eventually adopting children, believing her experiences would help her raise compassionate, understanding kids. She had started saving for a house in a diverse neighborhood where she hoped to put down roots. Friends recall her discussing plans to write a memoir about her experiences in healthcare as a transgender woman, hoping to inspire others following similar paths. In the weeks before her death, Ashia seemed optimistic. She had booked a vacation to celebrate her upcoming 35th birthday. She was researching graduate programs. She had recently reconnected with an estranged uncle who had finally come to accept her identity. None of these dreams would materialize. On June 1, 2023, the first day of Pride Month, Ashia Davis entered a hotel room for what should have been a brief meeting. Instead, it became the site of her violent end, cutting short a life defined by perseverance, compassion, and the courage to be authentically herself despite the obstacles society placed in her path. The nurse who had saved countless lives couldn't save her own. In the final week of May 2023, Ashia Davis went about her life with no indication of the tragedy that awaited her. She worked her regular shifts at the hospital, attended a friend's birthday dinner, and helped her mother with grocery shopping. According to text messages later recovered from her phone, she was excited about the upcoming Pride Month celebrations in Atlanta. "Can't wait for the parade this year," she messaged a friend on May 28th. "Feels like we need the joy more than ever." On May 30th, Ashia received a message on a dating app from a user who identified himself as Carlos. Their initial conversation seemed casual and friendly. Carlos claimed to be 21 years old, though he was actually 17-year-old Carlos Scotland. The two exchanged messages throughout the day, with Carlos expressing interest in meeting Ashia. Phone records show that their conversation moved from the dating app to text messages that same evening. Carlos suggested meeting at a hotel rather than a public place, claiming he was visiting from out of town. Ashia initially hesitated but eventually agreed to meet him at the Gateway Hotel in downtown Atlanta on June 1st. A coworker later told police that Ashia mentioned meeting someone new during their shift on May 31st. "She seemed cautiously optimistic," the coworker recalled. "She told me she was just going to meet for a quick coffee in the hotel lobby, nothing more." That same day, Ashia called her mother and made plans to have dinner together on the weekend. She mentioned nothing about meeting someone new, suggesting she viewed the meetup as casual and not worth discussing with family. Security footage from Ashia's apartment building showed her leaving at approximately 5:30 p.m. on June 1st. She was dressed casually, in jeans and a blue blouse, carrying a small purse. She told the doorman she wouldn't be long. What Ashia didn't know was that Carlos Scotland had already checked into the Gateway Hotel at 4:45 p.m. that afternoon. Hotel records show he paid in cash for a one-night stay in room 237. The desk clerk later remembered him seeming nervous, but didn't think much of it at the time. June 1st wasn't just any day. It marked the beginning of Pride Month, a time of celebration for the LGBTQ+ community. Rainbow flags were being raised across the city. Local businesses had put up pride decorations. The Atlanta Pride Committee had just announced their schedule of events for the month. For Ashia, Pride Month had always held special significance. Friends later shared that she viewed it as a time to reflect on her journey and celebrate how far she'd come. In previous years, she had participated in various Pride events and volunteered at health clinics offering services to the LGBTQ+ community. As Ashia drove to the Gateway Hotel that evening, she had no reason to suspect danger. Her text messages to Carlos were friendly but cautious. Her last message, sent at 6:12 p.m., read simply, "Just parked. See you in the lobby in 5." She never sent another text. On June 1st, 2023, the first day of Pride Month, Ashia Davis met with 17-year-old Carlos Scotland at the Woodward Inn in Highland Park, Michigan. The Woodward Inn, a modest hotel in this Detroit suburb, would become the site of a tragedy that would soon ripple through communities across the nation. The exact details of how Ashia and Carlos initially connected aren't fully documented in public records, but investigators determined they had arranged to meet through online communication, a common way for people to connect in the digital age. Highland Park, a small enclave surrounded by Detroit, has faced its share of economic challenges over the decades. The Woodward Inn sits along its namesake avenue, one of Metro Detroit's main thoroughfares. On that warm, early summer day, as Pride Month celebrations were just beginning across the country, Ashia arrived at the hotel. As a 34-year-old Black transgender woman who worked as a nurse, Ashia had navigated life's complexities with determination and resilience, qualities that had helped her succeed in her healthcare career despite the additional barriers she faced. What is known is that Ashia and Carlos ended up in a hotel room together. The exact timeline of their interaction remains partially unclear, but what began as a meetup escalated into a deadly confrontation. The room, which would later be processed as a crime scene, became the site of violence that would end Ashia's life and forever change the trajectory of Carlos. According to the investigation, Carlos Scotland attacked Ashia in the hotel room. The exact trigger for the violence hasn't been definitively established in public records. Some community advocates later questioned whether it might have been a case of trans panic, a deeply problematic reaction sometimes claimed by perpetrators upon discovering someone's transgender identity. However, official reports did not confirm this speculation. What is certain is that the outcome was tragic. Ashia Davis lost her life through violence. The crime scene revealed evidence of a struggle. Ashia had suffered fatal injuries during the attack. Hotel staff, likely responding to concerns from other guests or during routine room checks, eventually discovered her body. The staff member who made the discovery immediately alerted hotel management, who followed emergency protocols and contacted law enforcement. Police officers from the Highland Park Police Department arrived at the scene, securing the perimeter and beginning the somber process of documenting the crime scene. Detectives interviewed hotel staff and guests who might have seen or heard anything unusual. Crime scene technicians meticulously collected evidence from the room, photographing the scene and gathering items that might contain DNA or fingerprints. Investigators also reviewed security footage from the hotel's cameras, tracking movements in and out of the building around the estimated time of the murder. The digital footprint left by the online communications between Ashia and Carlos proved crucial to the investigation. Investigators were able to identify Carlos Scotland as the suspect relatively quickly, though the specific investigative methods that led to his identification weren't extensively detailed in public records. What is clear is that sufficient evidence existed to connect him to the crime. The murder of Ashia Davis on the first day of Pride Month added a particularly painful dimension to the tragedy. For many in the LGBTQ+ community, especially transgender women of color, the timing highlighted the ongoing violence they face even during a month meant to celebrate pride and progress. Local LGBTQ+ organizations in Detroit held vigils in the days following the news, with candles illuminating photographs of Ashia and too many others lost to similar violence. The investigation would soon reveal that Carlos Scotland, despite being only 17 years old, would face serious legal consequences for his actions in that hotel room. The Wayne County Prosecutor's Office reviewed the evidence and made the decision to charge him as an adult, recognizing the severity of the crime committed against Ashia Davis. This decision reflected both the nature of the crime and the legal standards in Michigan for trying certain minors as adults in cases of violent felonies. As news of Ashia's death spread, it sent shockwaves through both the local community and the broader LGBTQ+ community nationwide, becoming yet another tragic example of the disproportionate violence faced by transgender women of color. Advocacy groups pointed to Ashia's case as further evidence of an ongoing epidemic of violence, particularly against Black transgender women, who face intersecting forms of discrimination and heightened risks of becoming victims of violent crime. Highland Park Police Department responded to the emergency call from the Woodward Inn on June 1, 2023. Officers arrived to find Ashia Davis deceased in the hotel room with clear signs of violence. They immediately secured the scene and called for detective support and crime scene technicians. The initial investigation focused on collecting physical evidence from the hotel room. Technicians gathered DNA samples, fingerprints, and other trace evidence. They photographed the scene extensively and collected Ashia's personal belongings, including her phone, which would later prove crucial to identifying her attacker. A detective assigned to the case coordinated with the forensics team while other officers canvassed the hotel. They interviewed staff members who had been working during Ashia's stay and guests in nearby rooms who might have heard or seen anything unusual. A front desk clerk recalled checking in a young man who matched Carlos Scotland's description, providing investigators with their first solid lead. Hotel security footage confirmed this account, showing Carlos entering the hotel and later leaving in apparent distress. The timestamp on the footage helped establish a timeline for the crime. Digital forensics specialists examined Ashia's phone records and online accounts, discovering communications between her and Carlos that had arranged their meeting. Within 48 hours of the murder, investigators had gathered enough evidence to identify Carlos Scotland as their primary suspect. Police located him at his family's home in Detroit on June 3rd. When officers arrived to execute the arrest warrant, Carlos initially attempted to flee but was apprehended without further incident. During the arrest, police discovered clothing that appeared to match what was seen in the hotel's security footage, with traces of what testing would later confirm was Ashia's blood. Carlos Scotland was taken into custody and transported to the Highland Park Police Department for processing. Given the severity of the crime, the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office made the decision to charge him as an adult, despite his being 17 years old. He faced charges of second-degree murder, with the possibility of additional charges pending further investigation. At his arraignment, Carlos appeared subdued as the judge denied bail, citing the violent nature of the crime and potential flight risk. His court-appointed attorney entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. The prosecution presented preliminary evidence, including the security footage and digital communications, establishing probable cause to proceed with the case. As news of Ashia's murder spread, the community response was immediate and powerful. Local LGBTQ+ organizations in Detroit organized a vigil outside the Woodward Inn on June 5th, with hundreds attending to honor Ashia's memory. Participants held candles and displayed photos of Ashia, many wearing nursing scrubs, in recognition of her profession. Ashia's family spoke at the vigil, with her sister Tamika Davis addressing the crowd. Ashia dedicated her life to healing others. She faced challenges with courage and never stopped being her authentic self. We demand justice for her and for all transgender women who live in fear. Media coverage of the case grew as details emerged. Local Detroit news stations covered the vigil extensively, while national LGBTQ+ news outlets highlighted the timing of the murder coinciding with the start of Pride Month. Several major news networks picked up the story, bringing attention to the ongoing epidemic of violence against transgender women of color. The case prompted statements from local officials. Highland Park Mayor condemned the violence and promised full support for the investigation. Our community stands united against hate in all its forms. We are committed to seeking justice for Ashia Davis and working to ensure all residents, regardless of gender identity, can live safely in our city. As the legal proceedings continued, Carlos Scotland remained in custody awaiting trial. The prosecutor's office worked methodically to build their case, consulting with hate crime specialists to determine whether additional charges were appropriate. The medical examiner's final report confirmed Ashia died from multiple traumatic injuries consistent with a violent assault. Throughout the investigation and legal process, Ashia's identity as both a healthcare worker and a transgender woman remained central to how the community processed the tragedy. Her colleagues at Detroit Metropolitan Hospital established a nursing scholarship in her name, ensuring her legacy of care would continue despite her life being cut short. Ashia Davis's murder represents a tragic example of a disturbing pattern of violence against transgender individuals in the United States, particularly transgender women of color. According to the Human Rights Campaign, which tracks violence against transgender and gender nonconforming people, 2023 continued a multi-year trend of elevated fatal violence against this community. Statistics paint a sobering picture. Transgender women of color face disproportionately high rates of violence compared to other demographic groups. The year before Ashia's murder, at least 32 transgender or gender non-conforming people were killed in the United States, with Black transgender women accounting for approximately 65% of those victims, despite making up a much smaller percentage of the overall population. These numbers likely underrepresent the true scale of the problem. Many cases go unreported or are misreported, with victims sometimes misgendered by authorities or media, effectively erasing their identities even in death. Advocacy organizations estimate that for every reported case, several others may go undocumented. The intersection of race, gender identity, and violence creates a particularly vulnerable position for Black transgender women like Ashia. They face discrimination and potential violence based on multiple aspects of their identity simultaneously. Research from the National Center for Transgender Equality shows that transgender people of color experience higher rates of unemployment, housing insecurity, and lack of access to health care, all factors that can increase vulnerability to violence. Ashia's case fits into this larger narrative while highlighting specific concerns. The fact that she was killed on the first day of Pride Month carries symbolic weight, underscoring how violence persists even as visibility and acceptance for LGBTQ+ communities grow. As a healthcare worker, Ashia had achieved professional success despite the barriers many transgender individuals face in employment, making her loss all the more poignant. The circumstances of Ashia meeting Carlos at a hotel reflect patterns seen in other cases. According to the Trans Murder Monitoring Project, a significant percentage of transgender murder victims knew their attackers, with many meeting through online platforms. This pattern has led advocacy groups to call for better safety resources and education for transgender individuals navigating dating and social connections. Legal responses to these crimes vary widely. While Carlos Scotland was charged as an adult, many similar cases see reduced charges or lenient sentencing. The trans panic defense, where perpetrators claim they reacted violently upon discovering someone's transgender status, has been banned in only a portion of U.S. states. Though it remains unclear if this factor played a role in Ashia's case, Carlos Lamar Scotland, who was 17 when he murdered 34-year-old Ashia Davis, will spend 17 to 30 years in prison according to the judgment, which was the sentencing guidelines after he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and felony firearm. Public health researchers increasingly recognize violence against transgender people as a public health crisis. The American Medical Association has formally called for better tracking of these crimes and increased resources for prevention. Mental health impacts extend beyond direct victims to affect entire communities, with many transgender individuals reporting heightened anxiety and fear following publicized murders within their community. Ashia's work as a nurse adds another dimension to understanding the loss. Transgender healthcare workers often provide crucial support to vulnerable patients, including other LGBTQ+ individuals. Research shows that representation in healthcare professions can improve outcomes for marginalized communities, making the loss of transgender healthcare providers particularly impactful. As communities continue to mourn Ashia and others lost to similar violence, advocates emphasize that addressing this crisis requires comprehensive approaches. Improved law enforcement training, economic opportunity, healthcare access, and cultural change to combat transphobia. Ashia's case, while tragically not unique, continues to fuel calls for these necessary transformations. Ashia Davis's story carries important lessons about safety, acceptance, and the ongoing struggle for transgender individuals to live without fear. Her death highlights the critical need for greater understanding across our society, from individual interactions to systemic responses. For transgender individuals, especially women of color, safety concerns shape daily decisions in ways many others never experience. The circumstances of Ashia's meeting with Carlos Scotland underscore the heightened risks that can come with personal connections. While everyone deserves the freedom to date and form relationships without fear, the reality requires practical safety measures. Advocates recommend meeting new contacts in public places, sharing location details with trusted friends, and establishing check-in protocols. These safety practices, while necessary, represent adaptations to a flawed system rather than solutions. The underlying issue remains a society where transgender individuals, particularly Black transgender women, face disproportionate violence. This violence doesn't occur in isolation but stems from interconnected systems of discrimination. Housing discrimination forces many transgender individuals into unstable living situations. Employment barriers limit economic opportunities, sometimes pushing people toward higher-risk income sources. Healthcare systems often fail to provide culturally competent care. Legal systems may not adequately protect transgender victims or may treat them with suspicion rather than support. Ashia navigated these challenges successfully in many ways. As a nurse, she had established herself in a respected profession, despite the barriers many transgender individuals face in healthcare employment. Her career choice reflected her compassionate nature and desire to help others, qualities remembered by colleagues and patients alike. Support systems prove crucial for transgender individuals facing these challenges. Ashia had connections within both the healthcare community and LGBTQ+ organizations in Detroit. These networks provided validation, practical assistance, and a sense of belonging that helped her thrive despite societal obstacles. After her death, these same communities mobilized to honor her memory and demand justice. For viewers seeking to be better allies and advocates, Ashia's story offers several pathways to meaningful action. Education represents the first step. Understanding the specific challenges facing transgender individuals, particularly those with intersecting marginalized identities. This education must go beyond awareness to include active listening to transgender voices and experiences. Practical allyship includes supporting organizations that provide direct services to transgender individuals, especially those focused on Black transgender women. These organizations often offer emergency housing, employment assistance, legal aid, and healthcare navigation. Resources that can literally save lives by reducing vulnerability. Political advocacy matters equally. Policies affecting transgender rights vary widely across states and localities. Supporting legislation that prohibits discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations helps create safer environments. Opposing harmful bills that target transgender individuals, particularly youth, prevents further marginalization. Perhaps most importantly, allyship means challenging transphobia in everyday interactions. When friends, family members, or colleagues make derogatory comments or perpetuate stereotypes, speaking up creates ripple effects that gradually shift cultural attitudes. These conversations, while sometimes uncomfortable, honor the memory of those like Ashia who face the consequences of unchallenged prejudice. Ashia's legacy encompasses both her identity as a transgender woman and her contributions as a healthcare professional. Her nursing career reminds us that transgender individuals enrich our communities through their talents, compassion, and unique perspectives. The scholarship established in her name ensures that her commitment to healing continues through future generations of nurses. The most meaningful tribute to Ashia's memory comes through creating communities where transgender individuals, especially Black transgender women, can live authentically without fear. This requires confronting uncomfortable truths about how prejudice operates at personal, community, and institutional levels. It means recognizing that safety for transgender individuals isn't a special accommodation, but a basic human right that benefits society as a whole. On June 1, 2023, the world lost Ashia Davis, a daughter, sister, friend, nurse, and proud Black transgender woman. Her life, cut short at 34 years old, represented possibility and resilience in the face of significant challenges. Those who knew Ashia remember her warm smile, her dedication to patience, and her authenticity in navigating a world that often made being herself an act of courage. The hotel room where Ashia's life ended tells only a fragment of her story. The fuller narrative includes her childhood dreams, her journey through nursing school, the patients whose lives she touched, and the communities she helped build. It includes quiet moments of joy and connection, that never made headlines, but defined her humanity. Ashia's story has catalyzed conversations and actions beyond the immediate circumstances of her death. The nursing scholarship established in her name at Detroit Metropolitan Hospital has already supported 2 aspiring nurses from underrepresented backgrounds. Local LGBTQ+ organizations have expanded safety education programs and support services, citing Ashia's case as a painful reminder of their necessity. In Highland Park and surrounding Detroit communities, Ashia's death prompted review of police protocols for handling crimes against transgender individuals. Training initiatives now include specific guidance on respectful treatment of transgender victims and witnesses, proper use of chosen names and pronouns, and awareness of unique vulnerabilities within the community. For many transgender individuals, especially Black transgender women, Ashia's story resonates as both painfully familiar and deeply personal. Each reported murder sends ripples of fear through communities already navigating daily discrimination. Yet alongside this fear runs a powerful current of determination to live authentically, to support one another, and to demand the safety and dignity all humans deserve. The broader implications of Ashia's story extend to everyone, regardless of gender identity. Her death challenges us to examine how we perceive and treat those whose experiences differ from our own. It asks whether we truly believe in the equal worth of all human lives or merely pay lip service to this ideal while accepting disparate outcomes. Ashia Davis was not a statistic or a symbol, but a unique individual whose life mattered. She was a healthcare professional who eased suffering, a friend who offered support, a daughter and sister who brought joy to her family. The tragedy of her death lies not just in its violence, but in all the future moments of care, connection, and contribution the world lost with her. As we reflect on Ashia's story, we're called to consider our own roles in creating communities where such tragedies become increasingly rare. This means examining personal biases, supporting vulnerable community members, and working towards systems that protect rather than endanger transgender individuals. Ashia's legacy lives on not only in memory, but in the actions taken to prevent similar losses in the future. What do you think could have been done to prevent this tragedy? The case of Ashia Davis raises difficult questions about personal safety, societal attitudes, and systemic failures. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below on how we might better protect vulnerable community members while working toward a world where such protection becomes less necessary. If this story impacted you, please consider supporting organizations working directly with transgender individuals in your community. Many operate on limited budgets while providing crucial services that save lives. I've linked several reputable organizations in the description below. If you found value in this video, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your engagement helps these important stories reach wider audiences and contributes to greater awareness and understanding. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on future episodes exploring cases that highlight critical social issues.